Okay, so we're going to play the intro now.
Okay, you just let us know when we're ready?
I'll just give you the thumbs up moment.
Okay. Hello everybody, good morning. My name is Mona Webby. I'm with Kelly Services and we are here live for True Paris. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a really great day planned of tracks. We've got several tracks coming up. And our first track, we'll kick it off with Oscar Major with Sonos, who will be our track leader, talking to us about, is content the new king for recruitment? So first of all, I work in content marketing, so I think it is, but happy to hear your thoughts and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, excellent, and thank you for introducing me. To start with, I'd like to ask everyone in this track to introduce themselves briefly, just to know who you are, and after that we can start the discussion.
Okay, great. So hi everybody, my name is Alexandra Laton and I work for Aquent. It's a talent agency for marketing and digital, and I'm an account director.
Sure, hi, I'm David Rivel from Pathmotion, and we have developed a platform which is an app essentially to help companies use their employees as ambassadors to engage with candidates.
Hello, my name is Angelique and I'm a student here at NAM and in Human Resources, and I work in Human Resources in recruitment.
Hello, my name is Julien. I work in 4 people agencies, and agency we deal with employer branding, and we advise companies for their HR marketing. And I'm actually a social media manager, so I help companies to put their employer brand in social media.
Excellent.
Hello, I'm Lisa Taylor. I work for a company called Launchpad Recruits. We have a system whereby you can have an extension of your website to offer video interviews to candidates. It enhances your employer branding and engages the client in the process of thinking that they're taking a video interview that's going to lead them through the pre-selection process.
Okay, excellent. Well, as Mona mentioned already, she totally believes that content is king, and I actually agree with that. The thing I'd like to know is content king for recruitment as well? And what's your opinion about that? Could you, Julien, please?
Yeah, okay. Actually, I'm pretty sure that content is king for recruitment also, because I think for employer branding, especially in social media, which is my field of expertise, I think that you need to put content first before marketing at the first place, because that's what people want to see and what want to engage with company is all about content. If the company is attractive for people, especially in social media, is because people want to get content. They want to be more in touch and get in touch with the company. It's all about content. It's not about just putting a job or just dealing with just from offer. I think especially the companies have to think about how they can engage with a great deal of content and how they can be attractive. Yeah, I think it is the first thing to think about.
So you use it as from a branding perspective,
yeah,
in a way to communicate with your audience, your clients.
Yeah. And after for the passive candidate, because everyone in LinkedIn or in video, in social network, professional social network, they're not here to engage with companies and just to get jobs. They're here to get news, to get content, and be more aware of their professional news. So is a company think about how they can be attractive with rich people in with a lot of great professional content that can be interesting for them. Maybe they can reach them and not just putting some application or job.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
You bring up a really interesting point. I have to say, you mentioned something that you guys do social advocacy, correct? So something that we did at Kelly from a content standpoint is along those lines, where we got a body of recruiters within the Americas to participate in a pilot where they shared content on our behalf. And it was all candidate-focused content, and I think at least at Kelly what we've done is we are trying to engage that passive candidate before they even become an active candidate who's really applying for a job. And we've been able to really find some success with using, like, I would say 100 to 200 recruiters in the Americas who take content that we've produced around job search strategies, how do you find your next job, you know, what are the new skills that you need to have in IT or engineering, and they post it on their personal social networks. And it's insane to see just how huge that becomes, because if I post it and I have 500 followers on LinkedIn and somebody else posts it and they've got 2,000 followers, and you spread that across an entire web of 200-300 people, and it's just grows and grows, and I think that's had a huge impact on the brand.
So for Kelly, what has been the ultimate goal to do that?
I think to build brand awareness. I think it's helping reposition our brand. Kelly is really doing quite a bit of work within the professional technical space. It's you know, a new market for us, and I think it's really helping elevate Kelly's brand in a way that will attract candidates who typically wouldn't have looked for Kelly originally.
Right. So how did you measure the success of using content for this goal?
Yeah, so I think some of the success measures that we've used is increased engagement with our content that you otherwise wouldn't have had with static content that just sits on a website. We have more visitors coming through our bit.ly links, people are sharing it, so I think we've been doing this for about 8 months so far, and I think what we found is we're able to take a piece of content that maybe we launched, let's say 2 months ago, it's on our website, and you have a lot of engagement right away, and then it kind of gets quiet, and you can see that on the analytics. And then as soon as you see we're doing the social pushing as well, there's a huge spike in engagement to the website. You see increased numbers of job applications, people joining our portal, so you see a lot of correlation.
So you see that really translate into brand awareness, into communication about, you know, the topics that you are talking about.
So far, I think,
right.
yeah.
Excellent. So how is your company using content for, you know, the goals that your company has?
I think it's all about innovation in the recruitment process. What we offer is for candidates to be able to engage with employers.
Right.
And if an employer wants to recruit somebody on their website, then there's no better way of, in our view, showing a corporate video so that you instantly get a feel for what the company does. That's real engagement from the very first thing, as you were saying. I know there are lots of companies who show individual roles on their websites, and that's great. Yes. But we try and take video one step further and bring the circle all the way round, if you like, by saying that in order to attract the right candidates, offer them a chance to stand out from the crowd. So if you're offering them a video interview, they can show you that they have certain attributes, they can show you their personality, you can ask them technical questions, you can ask them, do you speak English, and actually test them as they're there. These are captured interviews, but they can be live interviews that we can record as well. And basically, you get a really good snapshot for a candidate and take him then forward to the next level. So it's something that I guess replaces telephone interviews that take a lot of time, are very costly, but it's something you can achieve in a very short space of time. The candidate actually really likes the fact that he's used to working on a mobile or a tablet, and he can do this whenever he wants as well. You know, he doesn't have to go to an office and meet somebody on the other side of the world. He can actually be at home. He can do it when he wants. He's comfortable with the process, and it's something that I think all employers will do in the future. It's just the time before that gets recognised and adopted. But it's, you know, when you look at the return on investment. There was somebody actually at the RMS conference yesterday in Paris from CERN in Switzerland, and he was one of the biggest advocates of using digital interviewing techniques, and I think he said that they have cut the cost of recruiting candidates by 5 times. It's, you know, it really is a tool that can save you a lot of money and inspire candidates in the company to show that you have gone an extra mile in wanting to engage them in your own process.
Okay, so now you use video for interviews with candidates. Do you feel that video is like the ultimate tool or the ultimate instrument for content creation as well? If you look at the popularity of sites like YouTube, for example?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was talking to somebody from the company Daily Motion yesterday, which is like the French YouTube equivalent, which is growing massively. And video is really such a tangible tool when you're reaching out to candidates, because you get an instant feel, you can really show your brand, you can engage, and as you were saying before, static content in one way on your website is useful, but when you add video, you're really adding animation and inspiration. And for example, we have a client in the UK that's a big department store. And before they interview every candidate, they put on their corporate video. So you open the doors and see, you go all the way up the stairs, you visit all the departments, and you get a real feel for what it's like to work for this luxury brand.
You make that an experience.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So what would you advise companies that use video for these purposes to use that instrument in different channels? So if you start using with like video, but you use other platforms, is video enough, or should you add other instruments to that as well to create content?
I'm specialised in video, so
Right.
I mean, that's an area I'm passionate about, to be honest.
I'm happy to jump in. But that's the point. I think that just to take a step back, you ask, is content king? And the answer, I think, to everyone is obvious. And it's really interesting, because we live in an interesting period where we've got a crisis, we've got a lot of unemployment, but on the other hand, talented candidates will be difficult and will choose carefully where they will go. And the way they will take their decision is very simple. It's with the content you make available to them. So obviously a job description is definitely not enough. So they'll make informed decision based on content that they will judge critically. But not only that, if they join you because you've convinced them through your content, and this content and the message you've passed across doesn't reflect the reality, they will leave you.
Right.
So, yes, content is important. There's lots of different ways to do content. Video is one of them. We are specialized. I mean, what we do is using employees. Very simple. Our belief, our DNA is really to say, okay, at the end of the day, how do you make decisions on your career? It's based on the culture of the organization, based on the people you're going to work with. So very simply, we put together employees of organizations and allow candidates to ask them questions directly online, as they would do at a career fair. Nothing new. Old concept has been done for decades, but has been done offline. The only thing that we're doing is replicating this concept online. A lot of people are kind of trying to do stuff with recruiters, but at the end of the day, what you want as a candidate is see the people you're going to work with, understand who they are, if you fit, understand what they do, and the employees are the best to represent and advocate. And it's in fact it's free content for an organization. Yeah,
right.
I mean, everybody loves to speak about himself, and if you have a way to kind of make it easy for them to do it, it will be free content for the marketing HR team, and it will help them gain time and money, not having to produce that sexy content, which is sometimes dangerous.
How did you get them to be involved in creating that content for you? Did they volunteer? Did you ask them?
It's purely on a volunteer basis. I mean, the way it works is that companies, and I really don't want to sell my product, but I think it's valid for any kind of employee-led initiative. It works always best when it's on a volunteer basis. Yep. A lot of companies are thinking of remunerating the employees for doing it, and our advice is always don't do it. Just don't remunerate them, because you kind of tweak the whole thing. It needs to be volunteer basis. They need to like to do it. It needs to be people who are social media savvy, and this is what what will give the best result, the best transparency. We also advise them not to interfere. So we have obviously guidelines. I mean the highlight is obviously 3 words is don't be stupid. But other than that, there's some guidelines we give. But then it's an honest, transparent interaction, and it's okay if there's some spelling mistakes, some grammar mistakes. We don't care. At least it gives a real transparency to candidates, and it shows us as well as an organization that you're comfortable enough to let your employees
Absolutely.
speak.
And it
So
feels
it's
really
huge.
human.
Very human.
So I think one of the big messages from that is content is important, but unless you're able to share it with the people, with the right audience, it'll fall flat. So I think
Absolutely.
having
It's
the
another-
automation tools and having the people to advocate the content is just as important as the content itself.
Yeah, obviously content that nobody sees is useless. It's like the best product. You can have the best product ever if no one sees it or uses it. There's no point to it. Absolutely. There's then a whole strategy in how you communicate that content, how do you reach people, and how do you use, your team to spread it.
Absolutely. So from the channels that you have experience with, also at Kelly, do you feel there are some channels more effective than other channels? So you look at Facebook pages,
Yeah.
blogs, YouTube channels that we've discussed.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there's any ones that are really standing out?
Yeah, so I think Kelly's focused on a few different channels, at least out of the gate, that we've been posting proactively content to. First, you talk about the primary channels, like our first party channels, so the Kelly Facebook page, the Kelly LinkedIn, the Kelly Twitter, the Kelly YouTube pages. That's assuming people are already connected to your brand. I think the more effective medium is going to where candidates and people are, so it's third-party groups and blogs and tech blogs. Like if we're trying to reach an IT community, we can't always assume that somehow they're connected to our brand. We try to place content where they're connected already, so any kind of community that they're a part of. From a Kelly standpoint, I think what's worked well for us is LinkedIn, because a lot of our recruiters are on LinkedIn, and I think naturally it just blends itself well to the recruiting space. It's more of a professional domain. But we found that our Kelly Facebook brand is really that like you get that true connection in a more casual way with a passive candidate audience. We find people every day saying, how can we find a job? How can we, do this or do that? Can you connect us? And we share our content there as well. And that works quite well. But again, I think for me personally, in the trial and error of these last 8 months that we've been really pushing this, candidate content to the market with the strategy behind it, it's really having a combination between pushing through our Kelly outlets, but then as well, you have to be where the people are, and you can't always assume that they're connected to your brand one way or another.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I would narrow down a bit this answer, because we talk about recruitment, but it also depends which kind of people you're trying to attract. And I think the answer is really different depending on the profiles that you're looking for, because the channels will be different depending, on if you're looking for someone in the finance industry or a creative person, and then it's totally different. At Aquent, we work only on creative talents, so creative, marketing, and digital talents. And even within this field, we see differences, because we have teams of recruiters only for marketing talents, and we have a team of recruiters only for the creative side. And they don't use the same channel, and they don't use the same content, obviously. Of course, content is always king, that's for sure. And especially for profiles that are really rare to find. Let's say we're looking for a PHP developer or someone with really rare skills. You won't talk to them in the same way, and by using content in their specific field, you'll have more chances to find them, or for them to find you, meaning that when you actually have a job for them, they'll be following you because they like your content and they want to read it, and then when you have a job to post, then they'll be there. So the answer is a bit more complex, I think, depending on the types of profiles, and this I can really see in my company, because we have different kind of profiles, but they're all really niche each time.
Right. So how do you make sure that your content travels digitally so that it it gets shared?
Yeah. Well, we use media platforms that are the most common, of course. So LinkedIn, as you mentioned, but LinkedIn again with a variation, because in LinkedIn you have different groups. So we would use content and spread it on different communities. So let's say developers, for example, there are lots of different communities on LinkedIn specialized in this kind of web development. So we have recruiters that are part of these communities and that would spread their content on those specific communities. And it wouldn't make sense to spread this content, on a bigger scale, because it doesn't interest everyone. So going into special communities within the media platform is a way to spread our content.
So good content only works if you really listen well to your audience and if you know really well where your audience is.
Exactly, because we say content, but it's not about pushing the information, and that's all about marketing is today. It's about interacting with people and not just pushing a message and getting it in their head, and it's not the purpose of it. We use Facebook a lot as well.
Because your audience is there.
Because our audience is there.
Have
and
you
because
found
we have
any
a way to-
success with SlideShare?
We haven't used it so much because maybe because of the profile that we work with, but we found that if we want interaction, Facebook and Twitter are the most used media, of course, and that's where people interact more than LinkedIn. They can react to articles, but of course they do it more on Facebook pages.
I found out myself that using visual things like images or films, movies, work really well in getting messages shared.
Yeah,
over
I agree.
Facebook, for
I
example.
agree. Aquent now does his own infographics, so we do lots of infographics and lots of videos, and those are the two main things that really work. Yeah,
Right.
for interacting
Yeah.
with people.
So, who do you think, Mona, from the recruitment perspective, should be in charge of content creation? Because that's probably always discussion. Is that recruitment? Is that marketing within your company? Not sure how Kelly deals with that.
Yeah, the way Kelly deals with it is I think it's a very collaborative approach where marketing takes the lead in producing the content, leveraging our subject matter expertise community, if that makes sense. So, we're kind of taking the lead on the development, the forward thinking, like, do we want an infographic, do we want a video, what does the budget look like, what is the style, the design, the core messaging development, the strategy behind it so that it aligns with Kelly's corporate strategy. All of that is fine. I think without connecting directly with the people in the business, I think the content would never succeed. So for us, what's been really successful is we've got a body of people within Kelly that have really skill sets in different areas, whether it's recruiting, whether it's IT, engineering, life science.
A good mix of people.
A good mix of people, and they serve as our spokespeople for the content and authors, and they bring in their insights. So we have the market research that supports the content, but that true personal voice is, I think, what drives it home, and we're able to position them proactively in the marketplace as, let's say, a life science recruiter who, look, by the way, has all this really amazing data for you on salaries and job trends and what the future of work will look like. So, who owns it? I think we need to look at it as from a holistic standpoint, but I think marketing, at least at Kelly, has helped really drive that strategy forward.
Yeah, but there is someone owning it as like managing it and
Yeah.
deciding what to do and what not to do.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, and you mentioned it's a really collaborative approach. How many people do you have involved in creating content for Kelly?
God, that's a big question. I
Yeah.
think you have people. It depends on the region, really. I think, for any single content piece, I mean, you obviously have the creative teams that are involved. You've got marketing that's involved. I mean, you've got the big strategy set, from the beginning, so we already know where we need to be. But, you might have 3 or 4 people for a content piece kind of lending their voice or feedback to say, hey, here's the research that we've put into this content piece. Here's, what the messaging can look like, and we kind of together craft the content and the messaging. So you might have a stakeholder community of maybe 3 or 4 people from a SME standpoint. So you have the subject matter expertise, or it could be one person, really depending on the scale of the content. If you have an infographic that's more data driven, you don't need as much feedback because the data is really what drives the content. If you have something that's more editorial style, you really need to work like as an interview, like interviewing the author and saying, okay, you know, what should the messaging look like? Here's some of the data. What advice do you think we really need to give candidates? You know, what do you see in your experience in the business or working with the candidates that we should be talking about? And I think between that and listening to what candidates want to hear about, so we do surveys as well every year, like what do you guys want to learn about? You know, what are you missing? How do you like to receive this information? I think all of that in collaboration builds a single piece of content.
Right. So you are heavily relying on internal resources for that, for your content.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the SMEs are definitely very, very key for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And anyone has an opinion about using external parties to, you know, create content for you, to help you creating content?
Yeah, of course I have, because it's kind of my job, actually. Yeah, of course, I think even if you take external parties to create content, the external party, the agency or a community manager, they have to get in touch very well with the internal, so that it's it's not possible to do a content as your own if you're not talking and if not exchange a point of view, an opinion.
Right. How do you keep it authentic then? Yeah.
Yeah, of course, because all the that matters in the company for the company came from the internal part. So even for an external party, you have to be very close to the employees and the marketing or the HR team. It depends on how the company work. So, but I think you can do it if you, as an external party, as clever enough to understand that you don't know everything, and you have to be very to listen to the people inside the company and to understand. It's like, you know, a journalist. I think you understand how the company works. You interviewed a lot of people for the teams, for the business units, etc., and to understand, and after to decide how you're gonna push the editorial line, and that's all. I think it can be working well.
Right. Yeah, maybe just to complement, I agree with Julien. I think this is where an external party can add a lot of value, and it's about getting the juice out. The juice is inside, but where an external party can help you is really in two ways. One is just strategy, making you think about how you want to put a project together and how you want to roll it out. And two is getting the pieces out of you. But again, I think the analogy with the journalist is perfect. It's asking you the right questions so you can yourself get the content out. And this is where I think an external party can add a lot of value.
I think we've heard a lot of good things here. So if I were a company that, you know, didn't do anything with content creation at the moment, what would be the right start? Do we have like a 5-step approach where we should start with and then next steps? Any suggestions?
I would say start small and start quickly, and get going. Do step one and.
So what would you define as step one?
I mean, you know, we have a very clear approach. Is employee advocacy, and it's the same with what we do. I work with big clients, so they're like, oh, how many ambassadors do I need? Do I need to get 200 people? I say, no, start with 4. You know, minimal. Start with 4 people telling their story, and give the opportunity to candidates to speak to them, and then go from there. This is just on one angle, but I think it's valid for every angle. Otherwise, you take years in coming up with like big plans, and that's very dangerous. So I think and it depends. I mean, it's difficult to give like generic advice. It depends really on where you stand, what you've already done, how big you are, what you're looking to achieve. But whatever it is, I would say get going.
Right.
And learn as you go along.
So start small. Any platforms that you prefer, that you would recommend starting with?
It depends. I think the first step is to listen and to study where your candidate is and that's because if you want to reach younger people, you want to be maybe on Facebook. If you want to reach other people, you can be on LinkedIn. So it really depends, and you have to study first, and all the influence about your brand is going, all your reputation, and as the first start, it can be all giving some insight for your strategy after. But you have to study and benchmark at the first place. You don't have one answer. It's not possible. It depends.
It would have been my answer as well. First thing before any action would be do your study and try to see where the talents are, and then listen to them first, observe before acting, and try to first listen to them to see what kind of information they need, how they interact, what kind of language they use, and then you can start spreading contact and interacting with them. But before, study.
Absolutely, listen first. Yeah.
I think it's very important nowadays for companies to have websites that inspire candidates too. So I think the website is a very good starting point if companies haven't looked at all the innovations around. Because I think if you're a candidate and you go on somebody's website and it is just boring and plain vanilla, you're going to be put off going to look at that company. But if you can see lots of dynamic things going on and examples, as you said, of employees who like what they do and who advocate the company, and there's videos and there's lots of different ways of attracting talent, then you're on to a winner. After that, social media is the obvious next step, and there isn't any lack of innovation in the market, so to be honest, nobody has any excuse for sitting there and doing nothing. The world is their oyster.
I have a question about as a student and I'm not working in a company in recruitment, but on the other side. And what about the small companies? Because small companies are looking as well for talent. So, and some talent doesn't have the web 2.0 training. So how to appeal these people in your strategy?
I think they have to
How to develop the fact that these people can also candidate and be part of the strategy.
I think in that case it's really important for small companies and companies that we speak to. We advise them to try and get much more involved in social media, do lots of blogs. They have to try and make people aware of what they do, what they're good at, and get people to come to their websites or to their Facebook or LinkedIn profiles. But it's really raising the awareness of what they do in order to just prove that they exist to the world, really. I mean, you're quite right, big companies attract the majority of candidates, but what happens when you get down to that level? You've got to figure out how you can raise your profile from there and be among the big boys.
Yeah.
So there's also a strong educational element in there.
Yeah.
But on the one hand, it's never been as easy and as cheap to be able to attract candidates as a small company. You've got all those platforms we talked about, which are mostly free. There's a lot of suppliers, cloud-based services offering prices that really varies depending on the size of the company. So I would say that today there's
no excuse anymore not do it.
Exactly.
And the other, I think we have to mix, online, but on offline too. Because that works well. It's events that can be spread in Facebook and media. So I think events are still a really good way to attract people and to get in touch with candidates. So, and especially in local company that that want to apply with people in the city. Don't forget to be you want to be on social media. You got a very career website, but don't forget event because it's all mixed up.
Yeah, it's important to have a very integrated approach in your strategy. It can't be all content. It can't be all social media or all events. I think having the right mix and balance of everything, I think, is important.
And can you give us an advice on to how to make this really sustainable, so a long-lasting approach?
Advice on making it sustainable over
Yeah,
time.
sort of, like embedding it into a company strategy or making a roadmap for the future.
So I think it's important to always stay connected to your business objectives. I think if you look at content in an isolated manner, I don't think you can sustain it. I think being connected to your leadership, understanding where the company wants to go in the future, what the vision is, who you're trying to attract from a recruiting standpoint, have that in the back of your mind, and then really sit down to build a business plan in the forefront. Understanding that as things come up and things happen, you may modify and shift, but really having a longer term vision is important. And then any advice I would give, at least in my experience in the last 8 months, is, you know, don't think that you have to start so large. Start small and start building different milestones, and you'll find the progress and the momentum will just gain and gain. And I think leveraging social media for the use of content, I think, is a really good way to start. You know, build a small circle of advocates internally, like a body of experts that you know will help pilot this within the company. So whether it's 5 people or 4 people or 10 people, that will just commit time to support it. And I think you'll see the impact if you have a good strategy to start and you've got the right support and you've got the vision with where the corporation is going in the long run. I think that'll get you going.
Yeah. All right. So, what about? I mean, to make this sustainable, you probably need to have top level buy-in. Otherwise, you know, directors will see you spending time on creating content as what they see is, you know, wasting your time. So, any advice on getting top level buy-in?
Yeah. Again, my personal experience has been, if you start with a small group and you can start to prove the results on a smaller scale, you show those results quantifiably, you can show the impact, and I think it's easier to convince, you know, senior leadership once you can actually quantify results. And with all of the measurement technology out there today, it's quite easy to correlate, you know, a campaign that you have on social media, leveraging your content to actual hits on your website, to actual results, to some measurement that you've identified. So I think that, for me, that's one of the first steps, is building a small team, build the case study, deliver it to your leadership.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think you have 2 cases. Either you have a leadership that pushes you to do it, which is great and ideal, but rarely happens. And if that doesn't happen, it's exactly that. Do without asking. You know, think it through, get the right people, do it small, and show that it actually works. And we've seen the cases with the most bureaucratic and large organization that exist, and you have champions who said, okay, no, I really want to do it, I'll just do it because it doesn't cost that much. Obviously it needs to be thought through carefully, but then show the results and say, listen, you know, this is what I achieved with that. Imagine what I could achieve if you gave me a bit more.
So it always goes down to KPIs in the end. I mean,
Exactly.
in marketing, if people do marketing here, it's always the main, you know, the main point. So if you set objectives and never do strategy without objectives, if you set your objectives with real measurements and real KPIs, that's the way to convince the boards, and that's usually how we do it, because indeed
What
we need to
KPIs would you
convince
use
them.
for convincing your board?
Depending on the channels you use, but likes and followers are always the first KPI, and then using how you convert them into, you know, some business leads or recruitments or numbers, concrete numbers, but not just the like. Likes would be one KPI, but then you have something concrete.
Increase
to link to
engagement, more comments, more shares.
that. Exactly.
So have you set levels for yourself that you want to achieve in terms of KPIs that you've defined that?
Yeah, well, when we did our first Facebook page, we had a KPI based on the number of likes and interactions. So we started interacting with our talents more, to you know, by asking questions, by doing polls, by doing fun videos that they would share just to attract them. And then we tried to see how many recruitments we would get from the social media. Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
That's a really interesting discussion. Really good to hear, you know, this involvement in content already. It looks to me that it's very much linked to employer branding. Just call it differently. But already some really good examples that you've shared. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you everybody, and we'll be back at around 10:30 our time here in France with our next session on the candidate experience. So thank you all for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.